Last weekend I went to the cinema to see The Long Walk, Francis Lawrence adaptation of the novella by Stephen King, written under his pseudonym of Richard Bachman, which he used for a number of back catalogue scripts he'd written in the early 80s. He decided he wanted to see if his books would succeed stripped of his name. So they were published under this fictitious pseudonym and still sold well. Ultimately, the name was revealed and became woven into King lore. But this is one of them, and it's a story set 20 years after a cataclysmic war in the United States has devastated its economy. And now attention is focused on the Long Walk. On the 1st of May every year, 50 young men chosen by lottery, in which everyone wants to enter, go from the starting line and start walking. They receive a warning if they stop for more than 10 seconds, having to maintain a speed of 3 miles per hour at all times. If they receive 3 warnings, they're shot dead. They have to keep walking until there's only one left. There is no finish line. They keep going until they drop or are dropped. The film is set over the course of the 5 days of the Long Walk, as they cover more than 300 miles, entirely on foot and entirely without rest. And it's the story of the main character, the leading protagonists of the walk themselves. Ray Garrity, a young man who has his own personal reasons for participating. Peter McVreese, who has a dark background and wants to do something about the state of the world, and hope to use their prize that they will receive if they're the last man standing. A single wish and effectively unlimited wealth. I was very impressed by this. It's a long time since I've seen a Stephen King adaptation this strong. I think maybe going back to The Mist. King's work tends to be extremely hit and miss. The fact that he's known for writing off the top of his head without planning means that often his endings let him down. But I think with shorter material, it works rather better. And with film adaptations, I think it brings out the best or worst in a story. You can have something like The Shining, which distills the heart of what King wanted to, I think, the heart of what the story is, but strips it of all the ephemera that King wanted to draw attention to, because the mini-series version of The Shining, with Steven Weber in the lead role, is pretty bad and sacrifices all the tension and mystery of the film for something that's quite dull and pedestrian. The Long Walk is focused on the characters. It's theoretically a science fiction story or a horror story, but it's really just a drama about these young men in dire circumstances and their experience, how they face death, how one experiences this situation. They form a camaraderie, these leading contenders in the walk, even though they know that some of them will be dead in a few days, in order to service the whole apparatus. And the notion of their lives under this situation, the depths of their character, the depths of their personality is mined really fascinatingly. I found it an incredibly empathetic, thoughtful film. Much more of a serious drama than notionally realistic dramas, because it really digs deep into their personalities, their backgrounds, why they are the way they are, and what forces in society have shaped them this way. I found it to be an utterly engaging, utterly enthralling film. The performances are superb. Cooper Hoffman, who I felt was entirely obnoxious in his previous lead in Licorice Pizza, I thought was excellent here. David Jonsson, who really stood out in Alien Romulus, is superb as McVreese. There's a brief appearance by Judy Greer as Ray's mother, and the Major, the theoretical leader of the new American regime who's overseeing the walk, is this continual brutal background presence, played by Mark Hamill, of all people, who is nevertheless utterly despicable. Lawrence really proved himself with the Hunger Games movies, and I feel really understood how to synthesize this character material and the life of people in horrific dystopia when subjected to these games. And The Long Walk is almost like a boiled down version of that. Instead of complex gladiatorial battles or the opulence and decadence of the capital, we get people walking down a road in the middle of nowhere for days until they die. The simplicity of it, the brutality of it, I think is a brilliant metaphor for the brutality of the dictatorial regime and the way the characters relate to each other, the way they evolve, the way their relationships evolve. I thought was a fascinating insight as to how life in such a society affects people and molds them. It's one of my favourite films of the year, certainly the best Stephen King adaptation for a very long time. Very, very highly recommended.